It's 6 p.m. here in Korea. Welcome to the newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's start with the headlines for this newscast. After 5 years of negotiations, South Korea and the U.S. reached agreement on a nuclear energy partnership. The deal should allow Seoul to expand its peaceful nuclear activity. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has again chosen not to apologize for Tokyo's wartime atrocities, this time at a meeting in Jakarta, Indonesia. This after Japanese lawmakers paid a visit to the Yasukuni War Shrine, making Beijing and Seoul see red again. The Korean government has decided to pull the Seoul ferry out of the water. A task force dedicated to the operation will begin by choosing a company for the operation, which is expected to start in September. After 5 years of negotiations, Korea and the United States have reached an agreement on updating their nuclear energy cooperation pact. A signing ceremony was held just a few hours ago between Korea's chief negotiator Park Ro-byug and U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Mark Lippert. Under the new deal, Korea can produce low-enriched uranium, or LDU, which promises a more stable supply of nuclear fuel. It also allows Korea to begin research on an experimental reprocessing technique called pyro-processing. The existing agreement, signed some 40 years ago, bans Seoul from engaging in reprocessing and uranium enrichment activities. The new deal will kick into effect only after the completion of executive and legislative processes in Seoul and Washington. The probe into the bribery list scandal is picking up ahead of steam. Prosecutors have begun interrogating key aides to the recently deceased businessman Sung Wan-jung, whose suicide note triggered a high-profile scandal. Our Park Ji-won reports.
On Wednesday, prosecutors summoned Lee Yong-gi, who served as the chief secretary to the late businessman Sung Wan-jung for about a decade. Lee was also reportedly present when the bribe of roughly $92,000 was allegedly handed to the current Gyeongsangnam-do Province Governor Hong Jun-pyo. The summons comes after prosecutors arrested another of Sung's close aides, Park Jun-ho, in the early hours of Wednesday morning following an interrogation that went deep into the night. Park, a former executive member of Sung's company, Gyeongnam Enterprises, was arrested without a warrant for emergency purposes on suspicion of destroying evidence. Park allegedly turned off surveillance cameras and hid company documents when prosecutors raided the company's offices last month and a second time last week. The prosecution believes close aides to the deceased businessman like Lee and Park could hold a key to their probe into the scandal, as they both oversaw Sung's political affairs for about a decade. With the investigation speeding up, high-profile ruling party politicians on the businessman's bribery list are expected to be summoned for questioning soon. Meanwhile, Gyeongnam Enterprises, which Sung took over in 2003, is now under court receivership. The projected losses to its creditors, subcontractors, and investors are expected to reach roughly $1 billion. According to financial industry sources, a total of 17 financial institutions have lent a combined $1.24 billion to the now insolvent company. Out of the total, some $680 million is considered non-collectible. Over 1,600 subcontractors are also expected to bear a loss about $230 million. With Gyeongnam Enterprises delisted from the stock market last week, individual and institutional investors lost about $110 million. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Rival party floor leaders met Wednesday but failed to open the scheduled plenary session for tomorrow to question the finance minister over economic issues. The ruling Central Party says it will not open the session because the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy party wants to use it to ask about the ballooning graft scandal and other sensitive issues that have nothing to do with economic policy. Earlier on, ruling party chief Kim Moo-sung called for a meeting with rival party chiefs and floor leaders over reforming the civil servant pension system, but the main opposition party rejected the proposal. The opposition party says the ruling party's proposal was a ploy to cover up the ongoing graft scandal. Tomorrow's session was to be a make-up session to question the finance minister, who missed an interpellation session last week due to a trip overseas on economic issues. Shifting our focus outside of Korea, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has expressed remorse for Japan's involvement in World War II, but once again failed to apologize for its wartime atrocities. The speech at a conference in Jakarta also raises expectations for Abe's upcoming address to the U.S. Congress next week. Our Kim Hyun-bin has more.
Speaking at an Asia-Africa summit marking the 60th anniversary of the Bandung Conference in Jakarta, Indonesia on Wednesday, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe expressed remorse for Japan's involvement in World War II, but failed to offer an apology to those who suffered under the country's brutal colonial rule.
Japan, with feelings of deep remorse over the past, have made a pledge to remain a nation that always adheres to the principles affirmed in the first Bandung Conference.
Abe's speech comes on the heels of controversial moves by Japanese politicians amid tense relations between Japan and its neighbors over history and territory. Earlier in the day, a group of Japanese lawmakers paid their respects at a highly controversial war shrine in Tokyo. Korea slammed the move, saying that the tribute shows that Japan is still not willing to face history. The day before the visit, Abe has sent a ritual offering to the shrine. Yasukuni Shrine honors Japan's war dead, including 14 convicted Class A war criminals. And trips there by Japanese leaders anger Seoul and Beijing, as the visits are seen as glorifying Japan's imperialistic past. Now all eyes are on Abe as he visits Washington next week, where he's said to become the first Japanese leader to address the joint session of Congress on April 29th. Critics say Abe is one worthy of the privilege because of his efforts to whitewash Japan's imperialistic past and wartime atrocities. On Tuesday, a group of U.S. congressmen urged the Japanese leader to use the address to apologize for Japan's wartime system of sex slavery. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The Korean government has confirmed it will attempt to salvage the Seoul ferry, which sank off Korea's southwestern coast in April last year. The related ministries held a press conference this morning and said a task force would be formed right away, but the actual salvage operation is unlikely to start until this coming September. Our Na Yeon-kyung has the latest.
There's a lot of work to be done before the ferry can be raised. But first, the task force will go about selecting a company for the job. One of the first obstacles they will have to deal with is the monsoon season, which typically ends in August. Given those factors, it's likely the actual salvage operation will not begin until September, according to Korea's maritime minister.
The government will also come up with a thorough plan to prevent the missing bodies that may still be trapped inside the ship from being lost during the operation.
The sinking of the Seoul ferry is remembered as the most tragic accident in Korea last year. It left 304 passengers, most of them high school students, dead. 9 bodies are still unaccounted for. The government says lifting the 6,800-ton vessel will cost an estimated $93 million, though the actual cost could be nearly twice as much because of the associated risks.
The primary risk is that the Seoul is a vessel built more than 20 years ago, so the body is corroded.
The public safety minister also said the degree of corrosion increases the risk of the structure falling apart as the salvage team attempts to raise the vessel, which is lying on its left side, without righting it. Wednesday's announcement was not unexpected, as President Park Geun-hye had said last week that her administration would try to raise the vessel as soon as possible. The government, still under fire for the way it handled the disaster, emphasized Wednesday that it will continue to communicate with the bereaved families throughout the operation. Na Yeon-kyung, Arirang News.
North Korea has officially extended the deadline for South Korean businesses at the Kaesong Industrial Complex to pay their North Korean workers. Seoul's Unification Ministry said Wednesday that the North told South Korea's Kaesong Industrial District Management Committee that the companies can pay the workers by Friday. The March wages were due on Monday, but a group of South Korean businessmen who visited Kaesong then had asked for a little more time. In February, Pyongyang unilaterally raised the wages by a little over 5%. Seoul says the issue must be settled through dialogue. North Korea warned the companies of a monthly fee of 15% if they fail to pay the workers on time. Once again, a group of South Korean activists has sent balloons containing leaflets and DVDs with anti-Pyongyang sentiment into North Korea. The group, Fighters for a Free North Korea, said the balloons contain thousands of copies of The Interview, a U.S. satire movie about American TV journalists traveling to North Korea on a fictional mission to assassinate Kim Jong-un. The group said it used a GPS system to confirm the balloons had crossed the border and into the demilitarized zone, though the claim hasn't been verified. The group's use of the GPS system was a response to suspicions that the balloon launch was only for show. The group says it's scheduled another balloon launch before the end of the week. President Park Geun-hye is now in Chile, the third leg of her four-nation tour of South America. Before departing Peru on Tuesday local time, she celebrated the first joint production of Korea's very own trainer jet, the KT-1P, with the Peruvian government. Our Choi Yoo-sun reports from Santiago.
Korea's very own trainer jet, the KT-1P, got off the ground and into the Peruvian sky. A ceremony on Tuesday marked the first local production of this jet by Korea Aerospace Industries and Peru as part of a $200 million deal to help the South American country acquire 20 KT-1Ps. President Park Geun-hye praised efforts from both sides, saying Seoul and Lima should focus more on win-win partnerships in all areas from aviation, the economy to culture.
앞으로 양국이 상생과 공동 번영의 미래를 향해 더욱 다양한 분야에서 협력을 증진시켜 나가기를 기대합니다.
Peruvian President Ollanta Humala expressed optimism that their technical cooperation will lead to making a supersonic multi-purpose advanced trainer jet. In fact, Korean officials say it could pave the way for Korea to export more advanced aircraft and defense supplies throughout South America. With a reputation of being a reliable partner, Korea has gained the interest of countries like Ecuador and Paraguay to develop their defense capabilities. A 2012 export deal with Peru led to similar agreements beyond South America in Iraq and the Philippines. Also on Tuesday, President Park held talks with the mayor of Lima, where she requested support for Korea's participation in the planning of Peru's river restoration and public infrastructure projects.
President Park Geun-hye has arrived in Chile for the third stop of her South America tour. On Wednesday, she will seek ways to diversify bilateral economic cooperation with Chilean President Michelle Bachelet.
Before her first official day, President Park met Koreans residing in the country, where she asked them to continue to help building a bridge between Korea and Chile. She also pledged support to meet their needs. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News, Santiago.
The Korean government has announced a plan for spurring the growth of the renewable energy industry. It plans to invest nearly $2 billion this year with the aim of creating a market worth over $4 billion by the year 2017. Here's our Kim Min-ji with the details.
The Korean government plans to invest about $1.7 billion to give the renewable energy sector a boost. Under its three-year plan, the government plans to foster growth in 8 key areas, including electric vehicles and solar panel rentals. It plans to increase the number of EVs in the country from 3,000 to 44,000 by 2017 and will build almost 600 new fast chargers for plug-in vehicles across the country. The government will also expand solar panel rental services to cover over 22,000 households from the current 10,000. The government is eventually hoping to build a market worth some $4.3 billion by 2017 and create some 14,000 jobs. The government will also develop key technologies, including those related to fuel cells, biofuel, and carbon capture and storage. It will also increase the number of so-called energy-reliant islands, which depend on clean and renewable energy rather than fossil fuels, to 9 from the current one. The government also plans to strengthen cooperation with international parties in order to support local firms to export new technologies and clean energy sources overseas. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And ahead of a planned nationwide strike, the government said it will take immediate and stern action against what it says are illegal strikes. At an economic ministerial meeting on Wednesday, Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan said the strike against government policy is illegal. The Korea Confederation of Trade Unions is planning a nationwide walkout on Friday to protest a government push to ease rules on the firing of employees and cut pension benefits. Choi added that Seoul will push forward with labor reforms and introduce a wage peak system, as an extension of the retirement age could in turn reduce the number of new jobs for young job seekers graduating from college. The Deputy Prime Minister also called on the Parliament to approve a series of bills aimed at revitalizing the Korean economy. Well, there's no question that education is extremely important in Korea, especially to the parents. Now, Korean parents are investing more into private tutoring for their children, even before they reach grade school. The Korea Institute of Childcare and Education reported that last year, Koreans spent roughly $2.5 billion on private education fees for children between the ages of 3 and 5. That's about 27% higher than in 2013, when private tutoring costs went down temporarily after the government expanded a free childcare program. Meanwhile, the average monthly spending on private tutoring for children under the age of 5 turned out to be just over $100 last year, about $30 more than the year before. The gap was about 10 times larger than the $3 increase in tutoring costs for students in elementary to high schools. Japan's benchmark Nikkei has cracked the 20,000-point mark for the first time in 15 years, with positive domestic indicators spurring investor sentiment. The Nikkei closed at 20,133.9 on Wednesday, just hours after news broke that Japan had posted its first trade surplus in 3 years last month, on the back of the weak yen and low oil prices. Investors are expecting robust earning figures from Japanese companies this year for similar reasons, at even a better rate than their Western rivals, and potentially producing double-digit profit increases. Japan's central bank is expected to further ease its monetary policy at its monthly meeting next week, which also boosted the bullish market. That's all from us for now. More coming your way with Hwang Jie at 10 p.m. Korea time. Thank you for watching.